It's day 2 of the Nepalese Prime Minister's visit to India. As they say, it was a moving day. Prime Minister Prachand met Prime Minister Modi today. They held extensive talks on a number of issues: the border, trade, transit, power generation, cultural exchanges. Everything was on the table. Like I said yesterday, this visit is all about resetting ties. So has that been achieved? From the looks of it, yes. Both leaders inaugurated a new railway line. It connects India to Nepal. They also announced new hydroelectricity projects and pipelines. A major power trade deal was also announced. India will buy 10,000 megawatts of power from Nepal in the next 10 years. There's more good news. Nepal has received permission to export power to Bangladesh. You see, Nepal and Bangladesh don't share a border, so they need India's grid to trade electricity. Today, New Delhi granted that permission. Nepal has also been given access to India's inland waterways. Again, this is very important. Nepal is a landlocked country, so access to waterways is a cornerstone of their economic policy. Those were the important announcements after the meeting. Listen in to the Indian Prime Minister describe the trajectory of India-Nepal ties.
2014 में कार्यभार संभालने के 3 महीने के भीतर मैंने नेपाल की अपनी पहली यात्रा की थी। उस समय मैंने भारत नेपाल संबंधों के लिए एक हीट फार्मूला HIT दिया था। हाईवेज, आईवेज और ट्रांसवेज। आज 9 साल बाद मुझे कहते हुए खुशी है कि हमारी पार्टनरशिप वाकई में हिट है।
This was the good bit. But what about the differences? India-Nepal ties have been strained recently by border issues. Nepal's former Prime Minister, KP Sharma Oli, unilaterally claimed Indian territories. Were those issues discussed today? Yes, they were. But the tone was encouraging. The Nepalese Prime Minister called for a resolution based on bilateral channels. Prime Minister Modi also promised to resolve all border issues. Listen in.
हम सभी मुद्दों का, चाहे बाउंड्री का हो या कोई और विषय, सभी का समाधान करेंगे।
Prime Minister Modi ji and I discussed the boundary matter. I urge Prime Minister Modi ji to resolve the boundary matter through the established bilateral diplomatic mechanism.
Another contentious issue is that of the Gorkhas. They are Nepalese recruits who serve in the Indian Army. It's a long-standing practice from the colonial days, almost 200 years old. But recently, Nepal halted the recruitment. Why so? Because of India's Agnipath scheme. New Delhi decided to limit the number of permanent commissions in the military. This angered Nepal, so they decided to halt the recruitment. Prachand was expected to take up this issue with Prime Minister Modi. He was expected to push for better terms. But did he? India says no. The issue of the Agniveer scheme and Gorkhas was not discussed. So the thrust of today's meeting was clear. Focus on the positives, build on the deliverables, and minimize the differences, which is good news for India-Nepal relations. Recently, China has been making inroads into Nepal. There was even speculation of Kathmandu picking Beijing over New Delhi. In that context, this visit is important. Prachand appreciated Prime Minister Modi for his neighbourhood first policy. He also praised India's presidency of the G20 and the SCO. The good news is New Delhi is not taking this relationship for granted. It's not falling back on just cultural and historical links. It's looking forward as well. The verdict is out. You may have seen the headlines. There's a global slowdown. But India remains the fastest growing major economy. Between January and March, the Indian economy grew at 6.1%. That's better than expectations. Just look at how the rest of the world is doing. Europe's largest economy, Germany, is in a recession. The world's largest economy, the US, seems to have dodged a default. But growth still remains sluggish. There's grim news from the UK too. Inflation is rising at record pace. There's a cost of living crisis. Lawmakers are considering drastic measures, including price controls. That's how bad things are. So leading countries are dragging down global growth. But India is able to weather the storm. How? What's working for the Indian economy? And what are the challenges ahead? Yes, India is faring much better than the rest. The challenge is to maintain this growth. After all, India is not completely isolated from global headwinds. What are the risks ahead? Tonight, we'll bring you a 360-degree assessment. Let's start with what's working for India. There are four key drivers of growth: manufacturing, construction, agriculture, and financial services. These sectors are fueling India's growth. All four have seen an expansion, a fall in oil and food prices. This has helped the manufacturing sector. Government spending has boosted construction, and there's a greater demand for financial services. Again, a sign of healthy economic activity. What about the future? Can India sustain this level of growth? Well, at the moment, it's difficult to predict, especially when we talk about a large and complex economy like India. But we'll try. Early signals are looking good. There are few things working in India's favor. Car, steel and power consumption was up in April. That's a positive sign. It points towards improving economic activity and sustained growth. So, we can expect manufacturing to do well. Forecasts for the monsoon season are also looking good. Experts say there'll be a normal monsoon this year. So, the agriculture sector has a reason to cheer. After all, it accounts for 14% of India's economy, but is also responsible for 42% of employment. That's why India's farms are so crucial for the Indian economy. We hope they have a good harvest this season. Now let's look at the big picture. How will the rest of the year pan out? So far, it's looking good. The full year growth estimate has been revised. Earlier, it was 7%. Now, it's 7.2%. But there are risks too. The Indian economy is not completely immune to global challenges. We've touched on this briefly in the past too. The global picture is looking grim. Germany's recession is putting pressure on Europe. In America, the US Central Bank isn't ruling out a mild recession. China was supposed to be on a recovery path, but it is stuttering. Countries like Singapore are reporting a contraction too. So how do these developments impact India? For starters, exports from India might fall. In fact, it's happening already. I have some data. Merchandise exports have shrunk by 3.7%. In April this year, goods contracted further by 12.7%. What explains this downturn? When there's a slowdown, it affects consumer spending. People like you and I, we tend to shop less. There's less demand, so exports will fall. That's how a global slowdown will affect India. There are some domestic challenges too, like the weakness in private consumption. What's that? We're talking about purchases made by households. They remain sluggish. It grew by just 2.8% in the last quarter, so there's scope to improve. For now, this doesn't affect the broad trend. To conclude with, the Indian economy is on a positive growth path. It is rising as the new economic powerhouse. The challenge now is to sustain that growth. Novak Djokovic has landed in hot water. The usual, I guess. He's playing the French Open in Paris, but back home, there's trouble. The conflict between his country, Serbia, and Kosovo has flared up again. We'll discuss the conflict in detail, but first, let's focus on Djokovic. He played his first round match on Monday. After winning, he wrote something on the camera. This is what it says: Kosovo is the heart of Serbia. Stop the violence. No prizes for guessing which side he's on. Djokovic is criticizing the government in Kosovo, but he's ruffled some feathers in France too. Here's what the French sports minister said. It was a message that is very activist, that is very political. You shouldn't get involved, especially in the current circumstances, and it shouldn't happen again. So France says, stop the messages. But Djokovic is not interested. In fact, he has doubled down. Listen to this.
I don't mind saying that. I mean, I would say it again, but I don't need to because you have my quotes if you want to reflect on that. I mean, of course, I'm aware that a lot of people will disagree, but it is what it is. It's something that I stand for. So that's all. You know, drama-free Grand Slam. I don't think it can happen for me. You know.
Kosovo wants action against Djokovic. It wants the International Olympic Committee to discipline him. But here's the problem. The Grand Slam rulebook doesn't prohibit political messages. Players can speak on controversial issues, which means Djokovic cannot be punished. Now let's focus on the conflict in Kosovo. So what's that all about? Kosovo was once a province of Serbia. It declared independence in 2008. Around 99 countries, including the United States and the UK, recognized it. The rest do not. Even India does not recognize Kosovo. The current conflict is centuries old, and it's rooted in emotions and demography. Around 92% of Kosovo's population is Albanian. They reject Serbian control. They say Kosovo is their own country. Only 6% of the population is Serbian. Most of them live in the north, close to the Serbian border. That's where the clashes broke out. Serbia considers Kosovo to be the heart of its statehood and religion. It is home to many Serb Orthodox monasteries. That's what Djokovic wrote as well. Kosovo is the heart of Serbia. But the truth is, the vast majority of people in Kosovo disagree. In fact, in 1998, they rebelled to get rid of Serbian rule. Serbia responded with a brutal crackdown. That's when NATO intervened and bombed Serbia. Since then, a NATO contingent is stationed there. So now you know what the conflict is all about. But why the sudden flare-up? Well, last month, local elections were held in northern Kosovo. The Serbs boycotted it. So naturally, the Albanian candidates won. They tried moving into local offices with police help, but the Serbs blocked them. Tear gas was fired and clashes broke out. It's a very complicated and divisive issue. Not for Djokovic, of course. Like most Serbs, he firmly opposes Kosovo. I won't say I'm surprised. Djokovic is known for his overt political messaging. Remember his vaccine drama? Djokovic refused to take the COVID-19 vaccine in the year 2022. Yet, he turned up in Melbourne to play the Australian Open. Now, Australia's laws made vaccination mandatory. So, Djokovic was deported from the country. My point is, controversies are not new for Djokovic, whether it's destroying rackets on court, hitting balls at line umpires, or commenting on highly political issues. In this case, the law supports Djokovic. He cannot be stopped from making political statements at the French Open. Nonetheless, let's focus on what he said. Stop the violence. Is there any chance of that happening? Leaders from Kosovo and Serbia are in Moldova today. They are attending a diplomatic summit. Needless to say, they traded blame.
The situation in Kosovo, in north of Kosovo as we speak, is quite tense, although it has been more quiet in the past 2 days. And it's caused because President Vučić of Serbia is inciting, politically supporting, as well as financially supporting illegal structures that have turned into criminal gangs.
Serbia will do its best and its utmost to de-escalate the situation, which means that we'll attempt to persuade Serbs to protest calmly and peacefully. Of course, they are very determined, they are very decisive.
Both Serbia and Kosovo are led by nationalists, so chances of a long-term resolution seem unlikely. But an end to the recent flare-up would be welcome. No thanks to Djokovic, of course. And we now move to Japan. Hope you remember the devastating earthquake and tsunami that struck Japan in 2011. It continues to haunt not just Japan, but its neighbors too. This time, the scare is over nuclear wastewater. In 2011, the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant was destroyed by a massive tsunami. 3 reactors of that nuclear plant suffered a meltdown. And over the years, the plant operators' woes have gone from bad to worse. It now has over 1 million metric tons of nuclear wastewater on its hands. And now, it needs to dispose of this water on an urgent basis. Just because the Fukushima nuclear plant is running out of storage space. But where will this water be disposed of? In the Pacific Ocean. That's what's led to a major controversy. Also, a PR crisis for Japan. Our next report tells you all about it.
This is how the streets of Tokyo looked on May 16th. These are people protesting against Japan's planned discharge of nuclear wastewater into the ocean. And it's not just people in Japan who are protesting. Entire countries have their fears regarding Japan's water dumping plans, like South Korea, China, and various nations in the Pacific Ocean, because it's the Pacific Ocean where all the nuclear wastewater will be dumped, about 1 million metric tons of it. Japan announced its plans to release the wastewater in 2021. The release is expected to begin in the next few months, notwithstanding opposition to the move. Japan's nuclear regulators are going to conduct safety checks at a newly constructed water discharge facility. And Tokyo will also wait for a final report by the International Atomic Energy Agency before releasing the water. The report is expected to come out later this month. An IAEA team is already in Japan. In the next 5 days, they'll conduct a review. The team has experts from 11 countries, but they are not the only ones scrutinizing this. Last month, a team of 20 South Korean experts visited Japan. They inspected various facilities at the Fukushima nuclear plant. In South Korea, the popular opinion is weighed against Japan's plan. According to surveys, 85% of South Koreans oppose the move. What about experts? They are still on the fence.
현장에서
We have made meaningful progress in the scientific and technical review process through on-site inspection and securing detailed data. But additional analysis and confirmation work is needed for a more accurate conclusion.
최인접국이기 때문에
Since our country is the closest country related to the Fukushima water release, we are reviewing whether Japan's water release plan is appropriate from a scientific and technical perspective.
적정한지 여부를
Japan argues that the water is absolutely safe for discharge and that it will have no impact on the environment or aquatic life. In fact, Japan says the water is safe to drink. It has been treated through the Advanced Liquid Processing System, or ALPS. This process removes 62 radioactive materials. That might sound like a lot, but it's not enough. An isotope of hydrogen, tritium, can't be removed with the ALPS process. And this is an isotope that has the potential to alter DNA. But Japan has a plan, a possible workaround to the tritium problem. The ALPS-treated water will be diluted with seawater. The dilution will reduce tritium levels and make the water safe to consume. Japan doesn't really have an option other than getting rid of the wastewater. Remember, there is 1 million metric tons of it. The Fukushima nuclear plant already has more than 1,000 tanks. They're completely full, and space for more water is running out. Couple that with the fact that release could take decades. This is indeed a predicament for Tokyo. Perhaps that's why Pacific nations, including South Korea, are now softening their stand. But while the governments may relent, the people aren't convinced that the water is safe.
And now let's talk about something else that always courts controversy. Amazon, the house of horrors brought to you by Jeff Bezos. The e-commerce giant's employees are angry once again. Workers descended upon the company's Seattle headquarters. They were up in arms yet again. So what were they angry about this time? A lot, actually. A diverse bunch of problems brought the workers out. First, there's Amazon's return to office mandate. The firm is being quite inflexible about it. It's causing a lot of resentment among the staff. Second, there's Amazon's recent firing spree. The company has laid off about 27,000 workers. The ones still left are not pleased. And third is climate change. Amazon recently backtracked on its climate commitments, and the employees are not taking it lying down. All these issues merged at the Seattle protest. Here's more. This is the Amazon headquarters in Seattle. And this is what was happening around it yesterday. The people you see are Amazon workers. They have decided to stage a walkout. And it was to send a message to the firm. Well, actually to send multiple messages. The workers are protesting a variety of issues. The first is the return of work from office.
As tech workers, we were told many times during the pandemic that we were doing our best work, that our productivity was high as it's ever been. We made so much money. And I'm not naive that the shift to remote work will take some adjustments within Amazon, but the benefits far outweigh those adjustments.
Today, we're here because a lot of Amazonians feel in their gut that something is not right with the company. And there are a lot of signs of this, such as a rigid, one-size-fits-all return-to-office mandate.
That's not the only issue, though. There's also Amazon's recent firing spree. The company has laid off about 27,000 workers in the last few months. It has also got people riled up. They're protesting the callous nature of the company. They're fighting back against the diktats from management.
So far, the options that seem to be given are do what you're told or quit. And that's why we're here, because I'm not going to quit and I'm not going to do this.
Protests over both these issues are quite understandable. The work from office mandate and the rampant layoffs affect employees directly. But the Amazon Seattle protesters also have another cause, an even bigger, more holistic reason to march. They're protesting to protect the environment.
Amazon's carbon emissions have increased 40% since the climate pledge was first announced. And that's while severely undercounting and underreporting the emission numbers.
The climate pledge she's talking about refers to Amazon's promise to cut emissions. Amazon had earlier said it would make all shipments net zero for carbon emissions by 2030. That was always going to be tough. Remember, every Amazon delivery uses a lot of fossil fuels. Planes, trucks and vans move packages all over the world. That means the company has a massive carbon footprint. It will take a complete overhaul to change that. And Amazon is not willing to walk the talk. So instead, it has shifted the goalposts. It has vowed to deploy 100,000 electric delivery vehicles by 2030. It still plans to go carbon neutral eventually. But now the deadline is 2040. And as we've seen, this isn't set in stone. Amazon's employees aren't having it, any of it. Neither the climate catastrophe nor management's mandates.
I'm out here because I refuse to just sit idly by while mandates are dictated from above down that don't make sense and hurt the planet, hurt families and individual lives, and just to get us into a seat at the office for their tax incentives. I am not here for it.
So looks like Amazon's bubble of troubles is only set to grow.
Email exchanges from inside the BBC, they talk about the risk of violating Indian laws. It's easier to rake up the freedom of speech debate, but does it give anyone a free pass to knowingly violate the law? America supports India because it needs India's support in return. And India is working with the US because it suits India's interests. This is how geopolitics works. Last night, he diffused a crisis with his defense minister. But today, Netanyahu was confronted with a new problem. His cabinet seems to have rebelled against him. The UK is looking at the Indian subcontinent to fill its coffers. That India seems to be negotiating from a position of power, like a partner and not a former colony.